Hello and welcome back to another reading of Anastasia. So let's just dive straight in. Let's start by let's call in our angelic guides and helpers. Let's call in the elementals, the dragons, the spirit animals, our ancestors, all those spirits that are working with us in our highest good and for the highest good of creation, that want to be with us right now as we dive into the next chapter of this book, which is called Forest School. Tell me, Anastasia, is this the way your parents brought you up? She responded after a brief pause, during which I gathered she was recollecting her childhood. I remember practically nothing of my papa and mama in the flesh. I was brought up by my grandfather and great-grandfather pretty much as I explained to you, but you see, I myself had a good feeling very on for nature and the animal world around me. Perhaps I was not aware of all the details of how it operated, but that is not important when one has a feeling for it. Grandfather and great-grandfather would approach me from time to time and ask questions and expect me to answer them. In our culture, older generations treat an infant or young child virtually as a deity and use the child's responses as a check on their own purity. I began asking Anastasia to recall some specific questions and answers. She smiled and told me. Once I was playing with a little snake. This is so interesting to mention a snake. Only I'm going to say, I've started doing a dream journal. I've been on and off doing this throughout my life, but I'm really becoming more aware of my dreams and actually going into the dream world with more intentionally. To carve the reality that I am seeding in for myself right now, because the truth is, I actually watched a program the other day and I heard someone describe death as waking up from the dream, because this really is the dream that we dreamed of in our true soul essence. And because it is a dream that we dreamed into existence, we can actually go into our dream world, which is more our reality, and change what we've weaved in to change this dream that we are living right now. So I love that. Where someone said, it was about a lot of people were going to die, and she was kind of saying a lot of people are going to wake up from the dream today. And I thought, ooh, that's beautiful. And within the last week, twice, I've had a dream of a snake. A snake has been in my dream twice, which I thought was significant. For me, I'm connecting to that as actually about the Kundalini rising, which I can feel happening again in my body. Once I was playing with a little snake, I turned around and there were grandfather and great-grandfather standing right beside me, smiling. I was very delighted, since it was always interesting being with them. They are the only ones who can ask me questions and their hearts beat in the same rhythm as mine. But with animals it is different. I ran over to them. Great-grandfather bowed to me while grandfather took me on his knees. I listened to his heartbeat and I fingered the hair on his beard as I examined them. Nobody spoke. We were thinking together, and it was good that way. Then grandfather asked me, "Tell me, Anastasia, why do you think my hair grows here and there, here and here," pointing to the top of his head and his beard, and not here, pointing to his nose and forehead. I touched his nose and forehead, but no reply was forthcoming. I could not give an unthinking answer. I had to understand it. The next time they came, grandfather again said, "Well, I'm still thinking why my hair grows here and not here," again indicating his nose and forehead. Great-grandfather looked at me seriously and attentively. Then I thought, perhaps it is really a serious question with him, and I asked, "Grandfather, what is it? Do you really want your hair to grow everywhere, even on your nose and forehead?" Great-grandfather began pondering the question, while grandfather replied, "No, not really." "Then that is why your hair does not grow there, because you do not want it to." He reflected on that, stroking his beard and mused as though he were putting the question to himself. "And if it grows here, that means it is because I want it to." I confirmed his thought. "Of course, grandfather, not only you, but I and the one who thought you up." At this point, great-grandfather asked me rather excitedly, "And who was it that thought him up?" "The one who brought everything up," I replied. "But where is he? Show me," great-grandfather asked, bowing to me. I could not give him an answer right away, but the question stayed with me, and I started thinking about it often. And did you eventually give him an answer, I asked Anastasia. I gave him an answer about a year later, and then they started asking me more questions. But up until the time I gave the answer, neither grandfather nor great-grandfather had asked me any new questions. So that's interesting, right? Because they're allowing her that space. It's a big question, right? It's about source, it's about God, it's about the whole of creation. You know, what question to be asked as a child, right? To then start opening you up. You know, I've just released a post on my Facebook, and I might do a video and link it on here, but about, you know, the question, who am I? This was a question that I started asking myself back in, I don't know, in my teens, early 20s. Who am I? Who am I? You know, and that question, well, it's such a massive question. It seems such an ordinary question, but it's such a massive question. In fact, I am going to do a video about it, so I'm going to leave that, I'm going to add that onto the end, just about how massive that question is. Now, it opened up so much on my path. So imagine being asked this question as a child, how that would open you up to so much. I gave him an answer, I gave an answer about a year later, and then they started asking me more questions. But up until that time I gave the answer, neither grandfather nor great-grandfather asked me any questions, and I began to get very concerned. Attentiveness to man. This is the next chapter. I asked Anastasia, who taught her to speak and converse, since she had almost no memory of her father and mother, and her grandfather and great-grandfather talked with her only rarely. The answers she gave were quite a shock to me and require interpretation by specialists, so I shall try to reproduce them as fully as I can. Their meaning has gradually begun to sink in. She responded to my first question with a question of her own. Do you mean the ability to speak in different people's languages? How do you mean different? What, you can speak more than one language? Yes, she replied, including German, French, English, Japanese, Chinese. Yes, she repeated, and then added, you can see I speak your language. You mean Russian? Well, that puts it too generally. I speak, or at least try to speak, using words and phrases you yourself use when you talk. So look at this, right? This is a girl that's never been to school. So look at our schooling system, right? I don't know, it depends where you're watching it from, but in the UK, you know, we learned a couple of languages, potentially. I mean, I did one at high school because we couldn't get a teacher for the other language. And honestly, you don't start learning language till late. I really found it quite difficult. Most people that leave school in Britain are not great at languages. So, you know, we're going to school all this time, yet, you know, not even great at our own language, right? And here we've got this girl that's grown up in the forest with no schooling system, and she can speak basically all languages. But not only that, I mean, wait till you get into this, right? So he's saying, what, you speak Russian? She's saying, well, that puts it too generally. I speak, or at least try to speak, using words and phrases you yourself use when you talk. So she's literally picking up on the nuances of how we talk, so different accents, different phrases. So it's even to that minute detail. At first it was a little challenging for me, since your vocabulary is not very large and you repeat yourself a fair amount, right? And we do that, and I noticed it, you know, I started to notice this the more that I awaken as humans, because we get stuck in these programs and we repeat the same things over and over again. And I've become aware of that. So, you know, I definitely have been dissolving the program self. I'm not saying I've dissolved it all, so I'm sure that I do it at times, but I really do see that a lot in the interactions I have, where it's the same thing being repeated, and I think, well, yeah, you've told me that like at least 20 times now. But I don't say that because that feels not very compassionate, but I do think that to myself. I think, wow, look how, I observe it from a place of compassion, and think, because I know it's not someone's not doing it to purposely just keep telling you the same thing over and again. They're just stuck in a loop in the brain, and they're literally forgotten that they've told you that, or they've got nothing else to say, because they're stuck in that outer layer of consciousness. So going deeper is just not there. I think we might even talk about in this book, or I've read it in many other places, how our conversations that we've interacted with each other have been so like superficial almost, right, on the surface, and not really about the deep stuff, about who we are, about earth, about us connected as these beings. But you know, that is obviously changing the more that we wake up. You mean Russian? Okay, hold on, sorry. Okay. At first it was a little challenging for me since your vocabulary is not very large and you repeat yourself a fair amount, nor do you have much expression of feeling. This is not the kind of language which easily lends itself to accurately saying anything one wishes to say. Wait, Anastasia, I'm going to ask you something in a foreign language and you can give me an answer. I said hello to her in English and then in French. She answered me right off. Unfortunately, I myself have not mastered any foreign languages. In school I studied German, that was the same for me, but with rather poor marks. I did okay. I did remember one whole sentence in German. Ich bin Corinne, that's the only thing I can remember. I am Corinne. With my schoolmates, and I learned by rote. I recited it to Anastasia. Ich lieb dich. Oh, I can't even read that. She extended her hand to me and answered in German, I give you my hand. Amazed by what I had heard and still not believing my ears, I asked, so then any person can be taught all languages? I had an intuitive feeling that there must be some kind of simple explanation to this extraordinary phenomena, and I had to know what it was so I could tell others about it. Anastasia, so have a go at it, explain this in my language and try to do it with examples so that I can understand, I asked somewhat excitedly. All right. Only calm down and let go, and you will not understand. But let me first teach you to write in Russian. I know how to write. You tell me about learning foreign languages. I do not mean just handwriting. I shall teach you to be a writer, a very talented writer. You shall write a book. That's impossible. It is possible. It's quite simple. Anastasia took a stick and outlined on the ground the whole Russian alphabet, along with the punctuation marks, and asked me how many letters there were. 33, I replied. You've got the 3 again. You see, that is a very small number of letters. Can you call what I have outlined a book? No, I answered. It's just an extraordinary alphabet, that's all. No, I answered. It's just an ordinary alphabet, that's all, ordinary letters. Yet all the books in the Russian language are made up of these ordinary letters, right? When she says that, right, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, every single word is made, so in Russia by 33 letters, in the UK it's 26 letters. The whole alphabet, just 26 letters, make up every single word in the English language. It should be easy to learn, right? All languages should be easy to learn when you think about it that way. Do you not agree? Do you not see how simple it all is? Yes, but in books they're arranged differently. Correct, all books consist of a multitude of combinations of these letters. People arrange them on the pages automatically, guided by their feelings, right? And from this it follows that books originate not from a combination of letters and sounds, but from feelings outlined by people's imagination. The result is that the readers are aroused by approximately the same feelings as the writer, and such feelings can be recalled for a long time. Can you recollect any image or situation from books you have read? Yeah, so I can remember so many books that I've read that create feelings inside of you, right? You feel what the characters are feeling. When you're reading the book, images are being created in your mind. It's like you are there, connected to it, because you're connecting to those feelings. Yes, I can, I replied after a moment's thought. For some reason, I recalled Lamonto's Hero of Our Time and began to tell the story to Anastasia. She interrupted me. You see, you can still depict the characters from this book and tell me what they felt, even though quite a bit of time has gone by since you read it. But if I were to ask you to tell me in what sequence the 33 letters of the Russian alphabet were set forth in that book, what combinations they were arranged in, could you do that? No, that would be impossible. Indeed, it would be very difficult. So feelings have been conveyed from one man to another with the help of all sorts of combinations of these 33 letters. You looked at these combinations of letters and forgot them right off, but the feelings and images remain to be remembered for a long time. So it turns out that if you link emotional feelings directly to these marks on paper without thinking about any conventions, one's soul will cause these marks to appear in just the right sequence and combination so that any reader may subsequently feel the soul of the writer. And if in the soul of the writer, where Anastasia, put it more simply, more clearly, more specifically, show me through some kind of an example how languages are to be learned. You can make me into a writer later on. Come on, tell me first, who taught you to understand different languages and how? My great-grandfather, replied Anastasia. Give me an example. I kept insisting anxious to understand everything in a hurry. All right, but do not be concerned. I shall still find a way to help you understand. And if it is that important to you, I shall try teaching all the languages to you too. It is simple after all. For us, it's quite incredible, Anastasia. So do try to explain and tell me how much time would it take to teach me. She thought for a moment as she looked at me and then said, your memory is no longer very good. And then there are your domestic problems. You will need a lot of time. How long? I was impatient for an answer. For everyday comprehension of phrases such as hello and goodbye, I would say it would take at least 4 months, possibly 6, she replied. Enough, Anastasia. Tell me how your great-grandfather did it. He played with me, right? Play is so important. Learning should be fun. It should be so much fun. And most people, at school, they're so disengaged. My nephew, he's just got a mechanics apprenticeship, and he's working quite long hours. It's like 9 hours. So he's only 16. He's been at school. So I was asking him. I picked him up the other day. And I said, "Well, how's it going? How are you feeling with the 9 hours?" He said, "I love it, Corinne." He said, he said it feels like it's less time than being at school. And I was like, well, yeah, that's because at school you were totally disengaged. He hated school. It wasn't engaging at all. It was just something that he had to do. And when I was doing something that he loves to do, and time is flying by because it's creative and it's fun and it's engaging, and we learn through being engaged. This is why school is so not what it's supposed to be, right? It's the opposite of learning. It's a machine to create slaves for the slave system and fill our minds with worthless, pointless information that's lies. Okay, so let me see. Great-grandpa played with me as though he were joking with me. Whenever he came to me all by himself without grandfather, he would always approach me, bow at the waist and hold out his hand to me, and I would hold out mine to him. He would first shake my hand, then get down on one knee, kiss my hand and say, hello, Anastasia. One time he came, he did everything as usual. His eyes looked at me tenderly as usual, but his lips were saying more, some kind of abracadabra. I looked at him in surprise and he said something else equally unintelligible. I could not take it any longer and asked, Grandpakins, have you forgotten what to say? And we know, don't we, as well, that if you've got any little children and they're born in one country and you take them to another country, the little children will become fluent in a language very quickly. So it shows the possibility to just learn through just watching and observing, because often they're going to these schools and they don't speak the languages hardly. They're not being taught how to. They're picking it up from the interactions around people. Grandpa, you have forgotten what to say. Yes, I have, great-grandfather answered. Then he stepped away from me a few paces, stopped to think about something and came over to me again, extended his hand to me and I held out mine to him. He dropped on one knee and kissed my hand. His look was gentle, his lips were moving, but no sound was coming out at all. I was even a bit afraid. Then I decided a reminder might help. Hello, Anastasia, I hinted. Correct, great-grandfather confirmed with a smile. At that point I realised it was a game. He and I would often play this game together after that. At first it was quite simple, but then the game became more complicated and more fascinating. It is a game that begins when one is 3 years old and goes on until the age of 11. When one undergoes a kind of test, this involves looking attentively at the person you are talking with and being able to understand what they are saying, no matter what language they are expressing it in. This kind of dialogue is far superior to speech. It is more rapid and conveys far more information. You would call it thought transfer. You think it is abnormal, something out of fantasy, but it's simpler and attentive attitudes towards man. Absolutely. We have got so many gifts and talents and natural ways of being that we've been disconnected from, programmed in the opposite direction, whereas Anastasia wasn't programmed in the opposite direction, hence why she's taken this on so quickly, not because she's different to you or me, but because of her upbringing, her environment, because of the programs she's been interacting with compared to our programs that have been all like to take us away, to take us into the artificial world, away from our natural ability. You know, there's all this AI coming out which is there to like replace the brain, but we don't need it to replace the brain. We need to learn how to use our own brains, our own bodies, our own energetic systems again, because we are so much more superior than a computer or AI, which is being disconnected from our true nature, which we can see through this book, right, as well. You think it's abnormal, something out of fantasy, but it's simply an attentive attitude towards man. Drawing upon a developed imagination and a good memory, it involves not just a more efficient method of information exchange, but getting to know a person's soul along with the animal and plant world and what constitutes creation as a whole. Anastasia, I said, what can plants growing in a garden plot possibly have to do with this? What is their role in all this? What do you mean? What have they to do with it? At the same time as the child is getting to know the world of plants as part of the functioning of the universe, he's also entering into contact with the planets. With their help and the help of his parents, he very quickly gets to know the truth and develops intensively in the fields of psychology, philosophy and the natural sciences, your disciplines. But if the game is played using some kind of man-made object from the artificial world as an example, the child will become lost. He will not receive any assistance from the powers of the nature of the universe. I have already noted, Anastasia, that in the final analysis, such a child could become an agronomist. I don't really know what that is. Nowhere would his knowledge come from in other areas. But Anastasia maintained that a man raised in such a manner would show an aptitude for quick learning in any of the scholarly disciplines. Right, I'm going to leave it there. That ended literally on 22:22 when I said that. So that might be significant for some of you out there. I'm going to leave it there, a little short one today. But hopefully you enjoyed that. And I'm going to link a video again about that question. Who am I?